Welcome to Get Real, How to Live a More Authentic Life, with psychologist and author of over 75 books, Dr. Barry Weinhold. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Get Real, How to Live a More Authentic Life with Dr. Barry Weinhold. He is Dr. Barry Weinhold. My name is Ben Barber. Welcome to the show. Dr. Barry, how are you?
Well, it's been a rough week. I started to get a histamine reaction. I don't know if you know what that means. It's my eyes started to get all itchy and red and watery, and my head even itched, and I started sneezing and nose running, and I thought, well, this is just my normal fall allergies to weeds. We've had a lot of rain this summer, so we're going to have more weeds this fall. And so I just kind of tanked up on some of my allergy medicine, and I thought that would be fine, but it didn't go away. It kept persisting for 7 straight days, and I thought, this is not an allergy to weeds. So I went online, and what I found quickly was that they said it can be caused by a food allergy. And immediately I got it. I thought, oh my, I've been eating too much wheat, and I'm allergic to gluten. I can eat some, but I can't eat as much as I was eating. I found this great snack. It was Triscuits and a Jarlsberg cheese spread on Triscuits, and it was a great snack. But it did me in. And so I had too much pasta and too much wheat. And so
how are you feeling now?
I'm better. Every day I'm a little better. It's still kind of, it affected my whole gut, and it's taking a while to restore. So I'm eating a lot of sauerkraut and fermented foods, and actually pumpkin seeds are good for it. And bananas are good for it. So I'm trying to feed my gut with some good food that'll help restore the balance that I lost in that process. How are you doing?
I am doing I'm doing well. I had so I get you on the food allergy. I'm allergic to mangoes, which I found out in one unfortunate incident a few years ago. My mouth started to blow. I think it's topical because mangoes are from the same family as poison ivy.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so fresh mango skin can sometimes, or fresh mango, like the flesh of a fresh cut mango, and it was on some chicken tacos. And when I drove home, all of a sudden I looked in the mirror and my lip kept getting bigger and bigger. But I actually had an allergic reaction similar this past week. I was the host for social media for the local county state fair in Rhode Island.
Oh.
And I must have gotten something in the animal area, in the livestock area. Something had gotten in my eye. Because I had an eye infection, and so, and I'm allergic to sulfa antibiotics, which apparently all eye drops are sulfa antibiotics.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I had to put this ointment in my eye for a week, and it made it so that I couldn't really see out of my left eye for about 3 hours, and then it'd be fine for 45 minutes, and then I'd have to put it in again.
Oh, boy.
And my right eye was overcompensating, so then I was getting headaches, and I've never gotten headaches in my life, and it was kind of a miserable existence for about 8 days. But all is well now.
Oh, good. Well, that's not fun to go through. But my allergy to pasta reminded me of a joke. I've been to Italy a couple times, and I've actually noticed that it's interesting. Mostly the women in Italy, they don't worship Jesus; they worship Mary. And this was sort of a surprise to me. They think Mary's wonderful, and Jesus is sort of like this sort of good for nothing son who went off and tried to preach salvation to the world instead of staying home with his mother. and so the Italian Catholics are a little bit unique in that way. But also, the story is that they finally got an Italian pope. They had German popes and other people, Argentinian popes, and now they got an Italian pope. And unfortunately, the Italian pope ate too much pasta, had too much vino, and it affected his heart. And the doctor said, you're going to have a heart replacement or you won't live. And so the Pope and his spokesperson go up on the balcony above St. Peter's Square, and there's like 100,000 people there. And he announces that they make the announcement that he's got a medical condition. He needs a donor, a heart donor. And immediately the crowd starts chanting, "Papa, Papa, taking my heart, taking my heart." And everyone is just wanting to do whatever they can to save the life of the Pope. And so they say, well, we don't know who we could trust as a donor, but we've decided on a method of finding out who would be the best donor. We're going to drop a pigeon feather over the edge of the balcony, and whoever shoulder that lands on, that will be the donor that's chosen, and that fate will have chosen that person. And so, not missing a beat, the Italians say, "Papa, Papa, taking my heart." "Papa, Papa, taking my heart." So the Italians are practical as well as spiritual and religious. So they.
I don't know how to follow that up. Today we're talking about why couples get together. So I'm curious as to no follow up for that joke. Why couples get together? So tell us what you've come up with about why we couple up and why we choose the partners that we choose.
That's a great question, and I'd have to go back to just look at my answer is going to come from about 45 years of experience working with couples and finding out some common things that are happening with couples that I think make a difference on who we choose to be in relationship with. And I've started with the fact that there are two basic needs all human beings are born with. And I think I mentioned this in an earlier podcast. The first one is the need for bonding and attachment, usually with their mother. And that happens usually in the first 9 months of life, pretty clearly. And unfortunately, the research shows that only about half of infants leave infancy with a secure attachment and bonding to a mother. The rest leave with an insecure attachment. And there are some long-term effects of that in people's lives. In fact, the research shows that if you don't do anything to intervene in terms of changing your attachment style, it will remain with you for the rest of your life. And so that need then shows up in the process of choosing a partner to be with. And then the other one that comes with it, and the other basic need, is the need to have a separate self and an authentic self. And that's what this whole podcast is about, is how to build an authentic self. Well, unfortunately, because we don't understand that as well as we need to, many toddlers by the age of 3 have not developed an authentic self. They are now living in a false self, as I wrote in my book. And so my estimate is, and the research seems to suggest this is true, that only about 5% of adults had that foundation built at age 2 to 3. So that is another piece of unfinished business that gets carried on into adult relationships. Now, both of these needs were interacted with other people in relationship, our parents. And so it would be natural that we would try to see if we could get those needs that weren't met with other people we interact with as adults. And so that's the unfinished business that all people bring to relationship. And it's often unconscious. We don't know that we're doing that. And really, I talk about how this is really just the natural learning style of human beings. Whatever we didn't get finished will show up over and over and over into our lives until it gets finished. And that's a basic law of how we learn. And so it really matters that when we are choosing somebody to be in relationship with, we're conscious of the fact that we probably are trying to meet some unmet needs. Now, hardly anybody is aware of that. I mean, it's the elephant in the living room that nobody notices. But what when I work with my young men, I say, now, if you meet somebody you think you're interested in, first thing you do is you have lunch with them, not dinner. Dinner's complicated. Lunch is simple. Its time frame is right there, and usually person will have to go back to work or have something else to do after lunch. So you have a time frame, and then during that lunch, you, in an informal way, you kind of interview them. Gee, I'd be interested. How'd you get along with your mom, your dad? Was there any addictions in your family? Were any of them addicted to any substances or alcohol or anything? Was there divorce in your family? How did you think that all affected you? And those kind of questions. Now, if your partner, and you'd be willing to answer the same questions, of course, if your partner says, well, I'm not willing to share that with you, then don't make a second date. It's not the kind of person. So what I'm saying is, get it on the table as early as you possibly can. A little story about that. My daughter was in a relationship and it didn't go well. And it turned out the man she was in a relationship was truly an alcoholic. And she didn't know it. She was enabling him. And I finally said to her, I kept saying he's an alcoholic. Oh, he just drinks a lot on weekends. And so I said, okay, if you can ask him to do without alcohol for 7 straight days, then I will know that he has his drinking under control. He couldn't do it. And when she found out that, it certainly, the light bulb went off. And so she got out of the relationship. Then she found another guy and they were getting along really well. They didn't know each other really well. And one day he comes to her house and he plunks his book down on the table. And he said, we got to read this book. And she looks at it and she said, you don't know this, but my dad wrote that book. So she knew she had the right one. And they've been married 30 some years and have a wonderful relationship.
Oh, that's Barry, not for nothing, but I do believe that in the last however many years you've probably written 90% of the books that have been written. That's how prolific of an author you are. But so I think the chances were probably quite high.
Yeah.
It's 70. Is it 77 now?
78.
70, of course. So so yeah, that's a lot, right? The whole process, there's so many things that we think that we think it's simple, right?
Yeah.
We think that we find somebody attractive and we say hello and we make each other laugh and then from there and then you build on it from there.
Right.
But there are so many things, and sometimes you hear people say like you're going to end up with somebody who's essentially like a mirror image of the parent that you had that you wanted more attention from, or
right,
or whatever. what do you think about that? Like, what is the so as I know that so much of it goes back to those two things, um, and that's why in a lot of circumstances somebody who might have a like an alcoholic parent or something will end up uh becoming in a codependent relationship or something along those lines. um how much of it is choice and how much of it is programming?
It's hard to say. I imagine it varies with individuals, but I think a lot of it is unconscious programming, uh, because people don't understand how this process of when they grow up can affect their adult relationships. They think, oh, I left all that behind. You know, that doesn't affect me anymore. And they don't realize that it has the long-term effects because it's the natural learning style of human beings to keep repeating things we didn't get finished. And so it's only natural it would show up in our relationships. So we tend to look for maybe mothers who will be more nurturing and people we can bond to as men and women too. I mean, but I work a lot with men, so I focus a lot on their choices of partners. And then also you want to look at for somebody that maybe you think is going to allow you to be yourself in the relationship. One of my colleagues wrote a book titled, "Do I have to give up being me to be in relationship with you?" And I mean, that's the whole issue there, is that we have this feeling that we have a self, but it isn't quite where we want it to be. It isn't as strong and intact and usable in all situations. So when we get into relationships, that's maybe a question we don't ask, but it should be asked. So I think that those are the two factors that we end up actually then sometimes marrying or being in relationship with the worst of our mother and the worst of our father without knowing it, because we didn't understand the connection with the fact that our natural learning style is going to propel us to look for people. I mean, when you go into a room, Ben, of strangers, and you look around the room, you probably automatically pick people that you think are interesting and you might want to talk to, and others you wouldn't even want to approach. Why? Because this is all operating behind the scenes here, and so we have that, and the more we can make that conscious, the more we can change the equation from unconscious to conscious behavior. And I'm going to talk about this in the next episode, but just introducing the idea of we have to really increase our psyche, our psychological intelligence, and understand these kind of factors that affect our choice of a mate. They affect maybe our career choices. They may affect a lot of things in our life, and we don't even know that they're having any effect. Any thoughts about that?
I I have a lot of thoughts on it. Mostly thoughts about my own life, as one does when it gets into to a subject like this. I think that one of the interesting things, um, I remember. So there was a toxic relationship that I was in several years ago, whenever that was. Um, and I remember thinking about, because it's in your head, right? Like pop culture talks about it, like it's in your head that like maybe you're gonna look for people that are that remind you of the opposite parent, or the or something that you didn't get met, or that reminds you of family or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I remember in the good part, before I realized how toxic the situation was, I remember thinking, she reminds me of my mom. The bad parts,
Oh,
the difficult parts,
yeah, right.
and And I think I remember saying to my dad, she likes history like you, and she's kind of crazy like mom. And I'm like, and then like afterwards, I'm like, that's not a good thing. That's not a good thing. I drifted towards the negative side of things because it does feel familiar.
Yeah, yeah. That's
You know,
well, you know where the word familiar, what the word familiar is. The word family is in familiar.
yeah.
So it's really what is familiar to us is what we learned in our family.
And since then, the opposite of that had a good solid relationship after that one, and that one felt familiar in the other ways, like in the
Oh,
good, in the ways that
yeah,
were comforting and stuff. And it's just like it's very obvious once you do the work on yourself. And I can't wait. In a couple episodes we're going to talk to one of your clients about this.
hmm
And you say it every single week almost on this show. Once you realize that you're not broken and that you're enough as you are, um all of a sudden, a lot of those, it's almost like a switch.
it
and
is. Yeah,
and and a lot of
mm-hmm.
those things of the attachment style and the becoming an individual, right? Becoming an authentic and autonomous self.
Yeah,
um Once you realize that you're not broken
yeah,
and that you're enough and that you're okay, and that there's nothing wrong with you, which is what you always say.
yeah,
There's nothing wrong with you. I'm not here to fix you because there's nothing wrong with you. um I Once you realize that, everything else becomes a lot easier.
yeah, yeah. It does. Yeah.
And then you start looking to choose people for the right reasons.
Well, let me just talk briefly to end this episode about the 4 stages of relationship. I look at relationships developmentally as I do individuals that go through stages of development. And so the first stage of relationship is sometimes called the honeymoon stage. And the characteristic of that stage is bonding and attachment. There's a lot of skin to skin contact, a lot of time together, a lot of sharing together, and if that goes well, that builds the foundation for the next stage. And it's really important to have that foundation built, and to take as much time as a couple needs to feel like that they now feel close to this person, they trust this person, because the first stage of development in an individual is the development of a sense of basic trust. The same thing is true in a relationship. You have to develop a sense of basic trust of this other person. Do they have my back in a situation where I'm hurting? And so that sometimes in the first part of the relationship, there aren't any things that come up that are disagreements or things where you would even wonder whether they have your back. That happens in the second stage, which I call the conflict stage. And in the first stage, this focuses on everything about us that is alike, everything that we agree on, everything that we see eye to eye on. In the conflict stage, some disagreement starts to show up, and inevitably, how you squeeze the toothpaste or roll the toilet paper or whatever, it can be a lot of simple things, or it can be more serious things. But how couples navigate this stage is really important, because this is where the second the part of the second need of building a separate authentic self starts to show up. Is if I can be in conflict with you and we can figure out ways to resolve those conflicts, I get I feel much closer to you, and I trust you more. So it actually builds the trust. But in many cases, couples, and my work with couples, 2 things were true in this stage. First of all, they didn't know why they were upset with each other. They were never upset for the reasons they thought they were, because that's where the projections and the stuff from the past starts to get dragged in. And then the second thing is they didn't really have very good skills to resolve those conflicts. So I worked with couples to do both those things, help them understand what they were dragging in from the past that was actually making the conflict they were having in the present much more difficult to resolve, and then also what they could do to build some skills. And I sent them home with worksheets, step by step. Here's how you work through a conflict. And they'd come back to me and I'd say, how'd it go? Well, we had a conflict, but we got out the worksheets and we went through it and had no problem. So I started to see that the skill building was working. And that kind of, those two parts of it seem to really help people in that conflict stage. Now, the third stage, which I call the independent stage, this is where that need to have an authentic, separate self shows up mostly. And then what we want to do here is help people stay as individuals as well as a couple. And so navigating that stage can be tricky because maybe the wife says, I want to go back and get another degree. And that means you're going to have to take over some of the household duties because I'm going to be studying. So it may mean some real shifting of responsibilities and roles in the relationship to maintain this separate but same kind of, the way I look at it, this is the first stage of relationship. And then the second stage is sort of this, we're now two separate people, but we're not really, we have some conflicts. The third stage, when we're in partnership and we are now cooperating with each other to help each of us get the needs met that we haven't gotten met before. That's where the self starts to emerge. The individual self starts to build and be solidified and supported by your partner. And then the fourth stage I call the interdependent stage. And this is the free-for-all stage where you if you've successfully met the needs and the tasks of the first three stages, the fourth stage is gravy. It's where you just get to enjoy being with each other and having a flow with each other that doesn't require a lot of heavy negotiation or any conflicts. It just seems to work. And that's how I look at relationships, that they go through these four stages. And some of them get stuck at the second stage. That's when I often see them, when they get stuck at the second stage.
How long there's no limit, there's no time frame on these stages, right?
No. I mean, there's kind of ballpark. I think the first stage is usually anywhere from 6 months to a year or two. It can last that long. And the second stage, there's no real time limit on that one either. I mean, that can last for a long time.
Once you get to the fourth stage, can you regress?
You're never in any of the stages totally. So in some ways, you're always regressed a little bit. So that there's always some issue that is hanging on from the previous stage that didn't get fully resolved. And so you're always kind of doing a little bit of looking over your shoulder.
That makes sense. All right. Well, I can't wait to dive more into this next week.
Yeah, I'd like to talk next episode about what does a authentic relationship look like. Give it very specific parameters and let people know what I'm talking about. I mean, that's kind of a concept of authentic relationship. What does that mean? I want to be very specific about it.
I love it. Let's do it. If you have any questions about anything, you can click the links in the description of this episode, and you can see the description, all of the self-assessments and all of the tools that Dr. Weinhold talked about in this episode and every episode are right down there. So thank you guys very much, and we will see you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye.
For more information, please visit the Colorado Institute for Conflict Resolution and Creative Leadership at CICRCL.org or click the link in the show notes.